Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning. Welcome to the first report. This is 8.0. That's right. And this is not Fletcher Tabuteau because he's not here. I thought I'd do a loan shark version this week. Fletcher's been called off by the Prime Minister to go to Papua New Guinea to do trade talks. The Minister of Trade was tied up, and being the Undersecretary, well, that's just the job you've got to go and do. So I thought I'd give you a very mundane rundown of the week that was, without going into too much detail, and I won't go over time. But we had the budget week discussions this week. It was the appropriations debate. We sat there through hours and hours of doom and gloom from the National Party, and I think a lot of their doom and gloom is actually based on the fact that they're just disappointed they didn't make it into government, and probably secretly that they're actually very impressed with the budget, because a lot of people were. I had some Tory mates back home over the weekend who were absolutely delighted to see the results that they weren't expecting. And I said, there's hope for you, there's salvation out there. You just got to come to the lighter, brighter side to get that salvation. Anyway, the idea of this budget from my perspective is a bottom-up building budget. It's a balanced, prudent budget looking at the three key pillars looking after our country, and that's social, economic and environmental pillars. Now, we've balanced out that investment into those three areas to ensure that we are building our economy from the bottom up, as opposed to, I have to say, Simon Bridges' approach, which is a more of a neoliberal, free market, trickle-down kind of an ideology that he feels like if the wealthy people at the top are really wealthy, then that'll just trickle down to those people at the bottom. But we know that for 35 years that hasn't kind of worked. So we figured that maybe we need to turn this problem upside down and look at it from the root and stem end of things. So we are obviously very intent on raising the minimum wage to a living wage. And I hear some people sucking through their teeth going, that could affect our business. But what people aren't talking about is the fact that we are going to be introducing a tax package for businesses for them to be able to afford to pay that increase in wages. Now, it's going to be over the next 4 or 5 years that will come up to a standard of a living wage. It will also stop that brain drain of Kiwis heading off to Australia to greener pastures to earn more money. So that's very, very important. I want to talk about the environment quickly because I've had a number of National Party people talk about the lack of funding in the environmental sector. In actual fact, we've had $424 million of underfunding in 9 years into conservation, and we've seen dock huts and track shuts. We've had all sorts of dock rangers that have lost their jobs because of the lack of funding and support. Well, I can announce, and it was announced last week, but I'll announce it again, that there has been an increased funding of $181 million over the next 4 years into conservation. With that, $81 million will be going into predator control, looking at, as part of that, to find better, more sustainable ways to control those predators. A life beyond 1080, if you will. On top of that, you also know that we are planting 1 billion trees. Now, those are native trees as well as pine trees, and that is no mean feat over the next 10 years to double the number of trees that we're planting. It's going to create job wealth in the regions. It's going to look after our responsible position internationally to ensure that we're working towards a carbon zero country. It's a very, very exciting proposition, but there's a lot of funding going into conservation, far more than that has ever been put, certainly in the last 10 years or more. Quickly, before the time runs out, I also wanted to touch on a very important piece of legislation which is going through the stages as we speak, and it's coming to an end very shortly in the next, hopefully next sitting week. And that's the base erosion and profit shifting legislation which Fletcher Tabuteau has been speaking to. This piece of legislation is an essential piece of legislation looking after New Zealanders, making our businesses, putting them on a level playing field with international businesses, because as many of you know, some of those multinational corporations, in fact many of those multinational corporations, they're not doing tax evasion, that's illegal. They're doing tax avoidance, which is a loophole enabling them to not pay any tax or sometimes very little tax. This base erosion, or BEPS, base erosion profit shifting legislation, tightens up that loophole. So not only does it put us on a level playing field, it actually increases our revenue through taxation. So some very, very good things happening over this week. Thanks for tuning in. I apologise that my mate Fletcher's not here today. We'll get him back next week and we'll get back in front of the camera. Thank you for joining us. Bye.